Hey, can you guys imagine if you were training for the pipeline where you would go to get some equipment? Like you don't even know what to get. Just know that there's going to be swimming, knot tying, that kind of stuff involved in it.
Well, it's really specific stuff too, right? Like you can't just get any rope. You can't just go to Walmart and get any fins. When I was training for the pipeline, you had to it was like an underground fight club. It was like I was doing a drug deal. I met a dude behind a building one time. He's like, "Hey man, you need some rocket fins." Like I just didn't have anywhere that I could go. Jared, is there anywhere that we could go? Maybe a whole bundle to get us started?
You mean like an Aspect War bundle from a TACP? I mean,
now
you could go there.
You could go to a TACP. You can get your entire Aspect War bundle. I heard they just got back into stock. I heard they can get there in as fast as 3 days. You can get yourself on your little path to being an Aspect War operator inside of business week. That's not too bad. You decide on Monday, you're training on Friday. That's pretty good.
Bob's your uncle and you're good to go. You get your high volume mass. You could also get rucks or the old Alice frames, and you can get body armor, anything you need, not just for Aspect War either. You could do it for Rangers, Green Berets, or even Navy SEALs and MARSOC. So go check them out.
Yeah. And that's ATACLETE Fitness. So it's attack, ATACLETE.com. And that's attackleet.com. Go get your training gear today.
And also use One's Ready as the promo code. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the One's Ready podcast. You're in the team room. It's Trent and I. We're crushing things per usual. No, actually, we're not. We just spent the last 5 or 10 minutes working on technical issues. So that this straw organization that you think we have our stuff together, we don't. Today's guest is actually Chief Tommy Case. I'm going to throw it out there just because we were joking about it, but I'm going to say war hero, right? Is that what we're doing?
That's what you're doing.
That's what I'm doing. Just see how many times we can put war hero in there.
God.
Good God.
It's going to be the shortest podcast ever.
No, Tommy Case is a TACP by trade. Dude, you've been doing this for a long time. So why don't you give us a little bit about it? Background about yourself, and then we'll go into all the other kind of good stuff, get the bona fides out of the way.
Sure. Well, first of all, guys, thanks for having me on here. This is a pretty popular podcast, and when I have general officers come to me and say what kind of fans they are of the podcast, that's a testament to what you guys produce and put out. So I appreciate that for the community and the brotherhood and to some extent the sisterhood out there. Yeah, dude. So yes. So I'm going to put the disclaimer out there now before I get does this dude sit in the bakery all day? Shout outs to let everybody know that I am on the verge of retirement. And like most of us at this age range, we are broken men. And sometimes doing podcasts is even physically painful. So with that being said, I came in 97, man. And it was peacetime other than some Kosovo type stuff going on. And I was married to my first wife, had a brand new son that was born. And to be honest with you, I did not join out of patriotic fervor. I am a patriot. I think we all are sitting in this room here, or these 3 rooms here. But I joined because I needed health insurance, man. Like literally, like I'd been to military college, New Mexico Military Institute. It's a shout out because I love that place. They helped produce the type of person I am today, including my parents, of course. I needed health insurance, man. I was working 2 jobs. I was working at a health club called Tom Young's Fitness in Albuquerque, and I was working at a place called Ceramic King. And those are the places that Ceramic King is where you literally make the clay that people use to do their ceramics and put in their kiln and stuff like that. And it was
nice.
It was awful, man. Chemicals and mixing in forklifts and all that kind of stuff. So I needed to do something that was going to provide for my young family at the time. So I enlisted in the Air Force. Go through your whole process. You go down to MEPS on this stuff. And this is way before we had any type of cohesive Aspect War unity thing across the 4 AFSCs at the time. We're all kind of on our own little pockets doing our own thing. I think CCT and PJ were a little more tight-knit with their in-doc program back then. So I took the ASVAB, and I was like the recruiter's wet dream, man. I was like, hey, I want to join the Air Force. Where do I sign? He's like, whoa, I have to sell this to you. I'm like, you don't got to sell me nothing, man. I am ready to go. This is my situation. So I did the ASVAB, and they're like, you did good on the ASVAB. What do you want to do? Here's what you qualify for. And it said one of the things was nuclear weapons apprentice. So nuclear weapons apprentice at the time was basically a rocket engine mechanic. I was like, man, I could do that for 4 years, and I can get out and get a kick-ass job with NASA. Hindsight being 2020, with SpaceX and everything else that's going on these days, I chose poorly. Just kidding. So I go down to MEPS, and and you have your L&O down there, and she says, she was at E6. She's like, well, if you want to do that nuclear weapons apprentice thing, you need to leave on this date for basics, so you have your tech school reservation, yada yada yada. And I did that. Reported to basic. I can't remember if it was week 2 or whatever it was, where you go down and they break you off. They say, go find your career field counselor. And I went into this room with this. I think it was another female. She says, "You're open general, man." I was like, "What?" Like, no, that's the reason why I had to leave on this day at this time. Blah 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 blah. She's like, "Don't know what to tell you. You're open general. Go downstairs and see the recruiter investigations," I believe is what she called it. So I went downstairs, and the guy down there is like, "Oh, you got a degree in criminal justice. Why don't you become a security forces guy?" And I don't know anything, And I'm like, "That sounds great." He's like, career field's full, man. Can't do that. He says, so we can either release you from your contract, you can go home, or you can just stay the course and just see what happens. Trent, I see you raising your hand.
I have so many questions.
You and me both.
There are people that actually investigate recruiters and security forces was full at the same time. Like, I don't know what's going on. Well, this was like
that's how I became your words, not mine, a war hero, right? So I told the guys, like, my grandfather had just passed away. He was in the hospital before I left. We were really, really close. And and they said, you can go home, but you'll recycle 2 weeks for his funeral. I was like, no, he was a veteran. He would not have wanted that. Spent 2 years in the Philippines back in the 40s. And so I said, no, I'll stay the course. Best decision I ever made. So we're doing our little field exercise. It was pretty lame back then. I think it was an overnight of the tents. He did some shooting and stuff with the M16s and the confidence course. I think what it was, and came back. We got pulled inside for this briefing. We had a combat control briefing. Hey, you want to jump out of airplanes and do surveys and travel the world and do cool guy stuff? Here, there's this. I was like, that sounds okay. Then we had the other briefer come in. Warren Gardner comes in. I'll never forget him. Comes in. He says, air to mud, you want to jump out of planes and blow shit up if I got a deal for you. And the way he sold it, like, I knew a little bit about like pararescue in the combat control side by word of mouth, but I never really invested in it. I think there's a small poster in the recruiter's office back in Albuquerque, but I never really invested any time of it. And when he said, jump out of airplanes and blow shit up, I was like, that sounds about right. So I got pulled aside. I filled out some kind of form. I got put inside. Came back from the little field X, and I went to this little tryout thing. It was me and a handful of other guys, and it was basically an Army physical fitness test with pull-ups in it. So I did it. We all of us passed it, and he said, "Congratulations, you all been selected," air quotes, selected, and just make time to go down and change your contract at MPF or MPS, whatever they called it back then. So my training instructor, he gives me a little pass thing and sends me down there. Of course, he tries to give me this thing. He's just like, I don't know much about TACP, but what I do know is it's pretty spooky. And I was like, what are you? What?
It's like, not a haunted house.
No, and you guys, in your respective One Zulu sides too, you experience the same thing where you're this. The Air Force really romanticizes about what the One Zulu world was, even though we weren't called that before, And so I walked down to this to MPS, and I was sitting in line. And this older African-American lady, very grandmotherly, calls me up, and she was very stereotypical. She's like, honey, let's get your contract changed. Do you really know what you're getting into? I'm like, I have absolutely no idea what I'm getting into, but it sure sounds better than the other option or the lack of option I have. And she says, okay, we got you sent her. I'm like, is there any way you could tell me what my job is going to be? She's like, yeah, they already had you plugged in. I said, well, can you show me? She's like, let me print it for you. And it's one of those old, this is 97, man. So the laser printer with the little rip-off sides, right? Doing that thing. So I get this thing and I read it, and basically in the paragraph, the only thing that I got out of it was like, you are going to be flight line technician. You're going to be responsible for scraping grease off airplane parts. And man, fellas, I'll tell you, man, even at that moment when I had no clue what I was getting into on my way to Hurlburt Field, I felt like I dodged a bullet. And fast forward 25 and a half years, I've literally been dodging bullets, and so that's kind of the history of how I came to be this TACP guy. My first assignment was at Fort Carson. I had really good supervisors, man. The NCOs that we had above us were all Gulf War dudes. Whether they did a whole lot or did nothing, it doesn't matter. But even, the generation back then, I know you guys can know what I'm talking about. Like, you were kind of scared of them. Thursdays was training day, and they did not want airmen in the office, man. And we would go out to our Humvees and do system checks and get our radios and stuff. And we thought we were getting one over on the NCOs. We're like, well, we're just going to jump in our Humvees and head down to Airburst Range and just goof off for the day. Not even realizing that what we were doing was generating training for us. We're doing convoy ops. We're talking on radios. We're doing vehicle nav. We're like doing all these things that we didn't even realize we were doing at the time. We spent, it was peacetime. We had 2 flights there. It was the 3rd Brigade Combat Team flight, which I was part of, and the Armored Cav Regiment, 3rd ACR. And they were kind of getting all the love with the Kosovo rotations and Sarajevo and stuff like that. And the BCT, not so much. I tried several times to get on some of those deployments just because I wanted to do something. But no, I feel like our fate was beholden to National Training Center rotation after National Training Center rotation, just over and over and over again. So again, I had some really good NCOICs, John Knight, Billy Burgum, Ben Bufkin, Nate Gesner, all those guys just, Chet McLinn, freaking Ranger legend in the community. John Knight, the Ranger legend in the community, both, supporting SF back in the day. And they really took me under their wings. My second day at work, I hadn't even been, back then we used to do this thing called, for your Army listeners out there, they'll know, Central Issue Facility. We go down the Army warehouse and give us a bunch of lame gear. And I think it was Ben Bufkin. He said, hey, what are you doing today? And Airman Case, I don't know what I'm doing. He's like, you're going to the range today. I was like, well, okay, Sergeant, I don't have anything. He's like, well, find some body armor and a helmet. They're laying around here somewhere, and let's go to the range. So my second day as a graduated TACP at Fort Carson, I was on Airburst Range controlling air and doing mock airstrikes on targets out there. Granted, I was repeating what they told me to say, but man, what an environment, right? What an environment to come into, and it's so cliche when we talk about for every bad day I've had in the Air Force or every bad day I've had as a TACP, I've had 30 good ones. You know what I mean? Like, I'm on the verge of retirement here. This is my sunset tour, and I am getting out at a time where I firmly believe is a good time for me and Kathy, because I'm getting out on with a good attitude. I see too many guys that just kind of separate and retire, like F this place or F the Air Force or F whatever. And I'm like, I'm getting out on a good note, and I'm so happy with that.
No, you're definitely going out on a high note for sure. Being the ops group, senior enlisted leader at Nellis with me, which is pretty awesome. We were talking about it beforehand. The folks on Nellis, the commanders on Nellis, really messed up when they hired me to be at the weapons school, you to be at the 57th Ops Group, and then Command Chief Tom Schaefer at the 57th Wing. You have 3 aspect war dudes all on Nellis, and we don't conform that well.
Well, I could possibly go wrong.
That's right, Trent. And I would also state that the 57th Wing is probably one of the most, if not the most influential wing in the Air Force in regard, the way Vegas, or the way Nellis goes, the way of the Air Force, right, is what they say, or something along those lines. But Nellis is really, outside of the 99th Air Base Wing and, them keeping track of water heaters and housing the MSG side, like the 57th Wing produces for the Air Force. And the way it influences the high-end fight, which obviously we're focused on now, I've learned a lot in the last year. That's definitely true. I've been there a year now. We've had these conversations, Peaches, where you're like, dude, what about blah, blah, blah? I'm like, man, trust me, you will get it figured out here in the near term coming out of the ST world, or the ST/ASOS world, So I agree with you.
So if we're going to go chronologically, which I kind of like,
sure.
You were doing NTC rotations, and I think people don't understand what that means and how awful that can be. And then, what did you do for the years up until 9/11?
Yeah, so NTC, National Training Center. Actually, my group owns that unit now, the 12th Combat Training Squadron out there in the middle of. It's literally the BFE of the Army. Fort Irwin. I'm sure a lot of your listeners know this, but it's a speck of dust in the middle of the Mojave Desert. The nearest town is roughly an hour and a half away, and my heart goes out to our families out there. As their group chief, they've got some significant challenges when it just comes to daycare and mom getting her teeth cleaned. Man, it turns into an all-day affair. So I would be shameless plug for those guys. Just think about that when you're headed out that way and you're dealing with the observer coach or trainers when you go out there as TACPs and integrate with your Army. But literally, you gear up, you roll with the Army, you go to the National Training Center, you go into MDMP, military decision making process. My dog just woke up, and all the things, and you roll out to the field, and you're in the field for roughly about 10 to 14 days, give or take, living with the Army, integrating, advising, assisting with a little bit of saying continue dry, the training version of cleared hot. And controlling air out there. But really the biggest part is just the integration piece with the Army and letting the Army know who you are and what you bring to the fight. And it's a constant re-education process every 2 years, because the Army command or chains of command, they rotate, and the staff just rotates out every 18 to 24 months. So I did that. Man, I couldn't even tell you how many times. It seemed like a metric ton, but I don't think it was all that much. But it was kind of like just beating my head against the wall, or, just here we go again, National Training Center with 1st Brigade or 1st 1/8 Infantry, Mechanized Infantry, just doing the same thing over and over and over again. And I did a lot of augmentation with our TACPs that were aligned against 10th Special Forces Group out there at Fort Carson, and loved it, man. Did some cold weather training with the ODAs and ODBs, which means you put on overwrites and you're taking your M4 up to, I don't know, name your ski resort in Colorado, and you're skiing down the slopes and everybody's looking at you like you're really, really a cool guy. And then the rest of the evening spent sipping beers and hot toddies in the hot tub with the team guys, right? So, and obviously we did some other things as well. But so when the opportunity came up to go into back then what we called was soft TACP. Now obviously we've morphed that to ST TACP as well. I got picked up for it, and I was under the impression I was a senior airman, man. I was an E4, and I was under the impression that I was going to get picked up. I was going to stay at Fort Carson, and they're going to pull me into over there with the 10th Group guys and hang out with the SF teams. Nope, because I was a senior airman, and this was pre-war. They're like, hey, man, congratulations. You've been picked up, and you're on your way to the 17th Air Support Operations Squadron in Fort Benning, Georgia, and you'll be aligned against the 75th Ranger Regiment. And I was like, whoa. Well, that's not what my understanding was. This is kind of awkward. And I had a couple of peers that kind of out-promoted me a little bit. They were staff sergeants, and they all went over to the SF side. I was like, and I'll be honest with you, fellas, I was on the verge of canceling my orders. Screw that. I'm not going to Fort Benning, Georgia. I do not want to be with Rangers, because the stereotype on that side was high and tights and 25-mile road marches every other day, right? That's not that. I did not want to be part of that. But I did. It was probably, that was the butterfly effect that probably set the motion and the course for the rest of my career, and really probably my relationships as well. So that's kind of how we evolved into going into the Ranger side of things. But I would be remiss without mentioning that I did do 30 days in correctional custody. I did make senior airman below the zone, and I was an A1C a week later, airman first class, all in the same time frame between NTC, getting picked up for the Ranger mission and all the stuff in between. So I did do that. So I'd be remiss without saying that I do not believe in a one mistake Air Force. And the Air Force hadn't given me an extra chance there, I wouldn't be here today either talking to you fellas.
Yeah, and for folks that don't know, correctional custody is kind of like jail for like a little bit. It's like, well, it's kind of like going back to basic training, but they're really not happy with you.
Well,
I guess. I don't know.
What I learned really quickly when it comes to correctional custody, it's not a thing anymore, at least to my knowledge. But what I learned there is, like, if you're an NCO to a senior NCO and you get in trouble, they put you in charge of correctional custody. If you're a E4 below and you get in trouble, they put you in correctional custody. The dude I had that was a master and was in charge of correctional custody, super nice guy, man. The guy but he was very easy to manipulate too. As a matter of fact, I ended up going home at the end of every day and coming back at 5:30 in the morning while the rest of those clowns had to stay inside. He would say things like, Airman Case, you're a TACP. You and I were both tip of the spear. I used to guard radar sites in Alaska. I'm like, yeah, man, we're just like each other. Like, totally get it, man. Like, we have the same language, man. Let's cut our hands and become blood brothers, man. And so I use that to my advantage to kind of make my experience in correctional custody. Well, it wasn't amazing. It wasn't the end of the world either. I ended up doing with stupid chores like the 8th Air Force History Museum, whatever's over there on Peterson, flooded out. And the basement was all wet. So like going there and dry stuff off down there. And me and this security forces guy that was in there, we would just sit in there and watch TV and call our wives on the phone that was down there and just kind of hang out. I had to go shred legal documents from the JAG office there, from legal office there, and they put me in a closet with just buckets upon buckets of files, and they said, just shred documents, don't read any of them. Well, when you tell Airman Case not to read legal documents, what are you going to do? So saw some really interesting cases within the Air Force, and some vindictive spouses back prior to Don't Ask, Don't Tell, making accusations of things that are actually okay in the long run. So yeah, I got to give a plug in there for correctional custody. And it was Peterson, was Space Command. They would do formation calls and talk to us in Klingon. And every time I would raise my hand, I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. He's like, you don't speak Klingon? Like, it was surreal. It was weird. It was hilarious. And it's a great part of the testimony and the story here, right? So
thank goodness for correctional custody. Hey, I do have a question though. You having experience with the Army pre 9/11, was there a big difference between the way that they treated the Air Force guys, or y'all got along, pre and post, and has that relationship changed over the years?
So what I remember, one rotation when Nate Gesner was my supervisor, we went in there. We hadn't hit the field yet. We were in the box yet. I didn't see him. So we walked into battalion headquarters tent, and they're going through briefings and stuff, and the battalion commander was in there smoking cigarettes like crazy. Like this is like 98, 99, whatever it was. And so Nate and I were like looking at each other like, well, if he can smoke cigarettes, maybe we should smoke cigarettes. So we're back there smoking cigarettes just like the battalion commander was. And the battalion commander's like, hey, Air Force, what are you guys doing? And Nate didn't get a chance to say anything. I'm like, smoking cigarettes like yourself, sir. He's like, you keep on, man. You just keep on. He's like, thank you for not kowtowing to me and just being a dude or being a person, right? The other instance I remember, back then the Air Force could wear camelbacks, man, because a little more common sense. The Army could not wear camelbacks. It was not an authorized duty. I'm like, you're out in the middle of the desert in July, man. Like, why would you not wear a camelback? And it was this new invention, right? So I'm walking across the gravel in the cantonment area, doing my thing, and I hear this like, hey, soldier, stop. I'm like, who knows who this guy's talking to? I'm not a soldier. I'm an airman. So I just keep walking. And I hear this about 3 times, and I finally hear the crunching of gravel behind me, and somebody's running up behind me, and I turn around, and I'm like, oh, hey, Sergeant Major. He's like, who the hell do you think you are wearing a camelback? That's not authorized. I'm like, this dude like sprinted like 300 meters across open gravel to come ask me why I'm wearing a camelback or to berate me. And I was like, oh, sorry, Sergeant Major. I'm in the Air Force. He's like, oh, okay. He's like, yeah, I get it, man. He was actually pretty cool, and there's some senior enlisted as one, as we all know in this room here, that some of us can be dicks. And he's like, hey, man, can you just do me a favor? Can you just put it on and throw your top over it, which is the way the Army could wear it? He's like, because it's just going to influence my soldiers to do other things. Because he gave me the why, so to speak, versus just chewing my ass up and down for no apparent reason because I was in the Air Force. It was pretty cool. So I think 2 or 3 rotations at the National Training Center, the Army nominated me as the hero of the battle, which is kind of a big deal when you're an airman. You get a commander's coin and maybe an Army Achievement Medal out of it. So what do I say that? I say that because, man, the Army valued us. The Army took us at face value. You know, they implemented us, and I had great. But it goes back to the same thing, man. The NCOICs I was with were all Gulf War veterans. They had all integrated in a wartime environment with the Army, and they knew how to do that. And so the transitioning in that time period of being in the TAC or being out forward with the brigade reconnaissance teams, you know, or you know, the AR stuff, like never did I have I don't think I've ever really had an issue with the Army in general. Now I know people have, but I think a lot of it's personality based and personality dependent. And I think at the end of the day, the objective is the same. Whether you're Air Force, Army, I don't care what your branch of service is, the objective is the same. And I say this to my CSS team, like my admin troops all the time. Whether you like it or not, you're part of the kill chain. You know, and the results, we all want the same results. We all want to kill the enemy and break stuff. And as long as you can do that and integrate with the Army, yes, absolutely. I pull the Air Force card for a day off or whatever. So I'm not doing stupid Army shit. But that's like to your point, Trent. At the end of the day, we all want the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Fast forward to my time in hanging out with the Rangers. Like, holy shit, man! I was sitting on an objective one night. This JFO Joint Fires Observer kid comes up to me. He's like, "Hey, Sergeant Case, just want to let you know that before we rotate out here, my wife had a baby and we named him after you." You know, I'm like, Jesus, like trying to look at this guy under nods. Like, I don't even know who this kid is, you know, on a target, you know, saying Roger over and over and over again. So how do I take that on the X, man? I don't know, man. Like, cool. Thank you. However,
Yeah, what?
Thomas is a very worldly name, you know, so yeah, like
Bro, I need you to hold up. I got an A10 coming in right now. That, you know, like, just give me a second, okay?
Well, he knows well as I do that going out on the X is the JTAC. You know, you spend a lot of time saying Roger over the mic, and that's about it, and sit in the middle of a courtyard,
Yep.
Slapping camels on the ass or whatever.
But that's one of the beauties. Like, that's why we are good at integrating in what we do, because we can speak Air Force, we can speak Army, we can speak Navy, Marines. We're not great at speaking each one, except for, I mean, we're great at speaking Air Force, but like the ability to translate and explain to the Army what's happening on the Air Force side of the house, and then explaining to the Air Force what's happening on the Army side of the house. Like, that is, like, those language barriers, believe it or not, for the folks out there, those language barriers exist. It is two completely different worlds, completely different languages, and we are like jammed right in the middle of all of them. And we have to be able to communicate in all aspects and understand what's going on.
I'll tell you, when you're hanging out with the Army, you're either one of two things. You're either the hero or you're the fall guy. And
Oh yeah.
there's in between. Because if you've ever sat through a warfighter exercise with the conventional Army, they do not care about capability. They care about butts and seats. When I could provide the same capability with 3 dudes on an 8-hour shift, they want 12 guys, 24 hours a day. You know, and those are some of the growing pains that we will never grow out of. It'll always be that constant battle on the Army side of things. But yes, to your point, we spend a lot of time being linguists and translating between sometimes multiple services, especially in the high-end joint environment. You know, which was pretty crucial when I spent my time up the hill at JSOC being there. So yeah, hero of the battle, because the Army appreciate what we're bringing to the fights. Man, I don't know about you guys, man. I grew up as a kid. I say I'm from Albuquerque. I was born there, but I actually spent most of my life as a kid in Socorro, New Mexico. And the reason why I just tell people I'm from Albuquerque, because they're like, where? You know, and it's just a spot on the map about an hour south of Albuquerque there. But man, me and my best friend Eric and my brother, we grew up playing Army. You know, we were out there in the woods playing war, walking around with our M16s that look real. You know, gracious neighborhood. We had set up Army checkpoints and search cars, and the neighbors were cool with it. And they pulled over that search and stuff like that. You know, I mean, just so I feel like my whole life has been a rehearsal for what we've been doing for the last 20 plus years. So yeah.
I could just see little Tommy Case out there freaking halt. Step out of your vehicle.
We were doing that. We're like stopping cars in the middle of the road and like, oh, that's the Case kid or that's the Williams kid. Yeah, we'll play along.
Oh God, here we go again.
Martial law again.
Yeah, exactly. So I know that you don't necessarily want to talk about it very much, but I'm sure you can communicate it very well. So and you go into as much detail as you want, but because I don't know the circumstances of the first Silver Star that you won, and for everybody that's out there, so they understand this, like, okay, so it's a big deal to be to do the actions that would involve being a recipient of one Silver Star. Like that's a huge deal. Like heroic actions, valorous actions, and to even be nominated for a Silver Star is a big deal. Chief Case has one Silver Star, but then later down the road, through some badass actions, actually is the recipient of 2 Silver Stars. So in the Air Force, there are only 3 individuals that have been recipients of 2 Silver Stars. One of those was Sean Harvell, who has unfortunately passed away. Ish Villegas, Ish Villegas is the other one who, pretty much everybody knows.
I'm sorry. No.
And then one by Tommy Case. So if you don't mind, what were you going to say?
Well, I'd be remiss, when I said it. So to Sean, rest in peace, man. Tragic. That was felt across multiple communities. And for Ish, if he's listening, like, dude, I need some hair tips because I can't seem to grow mine as well as you do.
Dude, he's like a wolf.
A little bit. Yeah, man. So, I got picked up. I was in the support. I was aligned against the Ranger Regiments. Back then, it was the 17th Air Support Operations Squadron. And we had 2 sides in that squadron. The one side was conventional, and they're supporting 3rd Brigade. 3rd Brigade at a 3rd Infantry Division. It was a kind of a GSU there. And then you had the Ranger side, which was just a handful of us. We weren't very big at all. I got there. I reported to Benning. I think it was August of 2001. If I could hold a crystal ball, right? So we all know what happened a month later. 9/11 happened. And what I learned really, really quickly with the Air Force, like I had a line number for staff sergeant, about to get promoted that following December to staff sergeant. What I learned really, really quickly, like even when hostilities kick off, professional military education still trumps deployments. So all the dudes I was with, they deployed to Pakistan and Afghanistan and stuff, and I went to Airmen Leadership School. Hey, infuriating. But man, did I not learn much. So, because I'm not. That's not a hit on PME in any way, shape, or form, man. Like I think PME can provide, and I have to say as a chief these days too, right? Like I think PME can provide some value in regards to how we approach things we're getting after as an Air Force and a Space Force. But back then, I was not necessarily focused on what PME had to offer me as an airman. Or Airmen Leadership School. I was focused on like, man, I wish I was in Pakistan or Afghanistan right now, and fellow Silver Star recipient, we'll get into in a minute, Eric Brandenburg, Brandy, who's one of my supervisors at the time. They came back from their deployment. I graduated ALS. I was in the team room and he pulls out these jars and he's like, see this jar, TC? I'm like, yeah. He's like, this is Pakistan dirt. You'll probably never touch it. Ha, 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 ha. And he did it in jest, and we all know the sense of humor we have across the One Zulu spectrum here. He did it in jest, but I don't think I should probably tell him this, man. But that, like, those words hurt, man. They lit a fire in me. Like, I don't think any of those guys ever realized. And I deployed that following spring to Afghanistan, and they're like, where can we put Tom where he's not going to hurt anything? Like, put him on the QRF down in Kandahar with 275 with Alpha Company. He'll be with a platoon from Alpha Company. Shout out to Sergeant Bannerman, who led me, and Barry out there that taught me how to use a 117 Fox out there because I hadn't learned that. And we did a couple things out there, and we recovered. I got a total story on it, but in the sake of time, recovered dead Americans from a crash C-130 out there, and just all sorts of crazy stuff. But you fast forward to about the 2002 when I got back from that deployment, we started rattling sabers about going back to Iraq. George Bush was in the White House, talking smack, if you will, in regards to the Hussein regime and all that kind of stuff. And we're all praying it goes, and I've got my own political views on whether the Iraq war was right or wrong at this point in my life. I was a little bit older, but we're all praying to go because we want to put our tools to the trade, man, and so we deployed, and we deployed into on the border there of Iraq and Saudi Arabia. and we sat and we sat and we sat some more, and we did so many static load training cycles every night of loading into MC-130s and C-17s for the big jump on back then what we called SIOP, the Saddam International Airport, which is now Baghdad International Airport. And man, I'll tell you, I'm so glad we didn't jump. So glad. I think casualties would have been significant and broken bodies would have been significant. So we didn't. So we got re-rolled. So we loaded up in a C-17. We took off and we flew into Iraq. I think this is about 3 weeks into the war, give or take, since the third ID started to push in from Kuwait. And but I do remember sitting there at night. I'd be doing like call for fire training with the JFOs, just was something to do out there. And man, we were watching planes go across the border. We were watching planes that got a couple of rounds put in their wings, landed where we were at, and then take off straight up in the air. Pretty sure we saw T-Lambs flying across, at Mach not. And like, man, put us in, coach, right? So we had a contingent of Rangers. Brandy was one of them that jumped into an austere DLS out there in the middle of nowhere. And then we air landed again. I'm probably the only dude with jump wings on the as a Ranger TACP who's so proud of the fact that he doesn't have a mustard stain because I saw how fucked up those guys got. Like, thank God I don't have one of those. But we air landed into H1 airfield out there in Western Iraq, and we walked down the tarmac for quite a ways. And then we got to, I think it was bombed out probably in the first Iraq war, I guess. But the buildings were like literally full of goat turds, So we spent most of the night just kind of shoveling those out, and we slept outside. And I was bundled up against next to my fire support officer, Captain Getke at the time. And we got a mission. And the way I understood it as a young staff sergeant, ETAC back then, and enlisted terminal attack controller, was we're going to drive out to the Syria border, and we're just going to freaking take out VISOP stations with close air support. So border control towers, if you will. And I was like, well, shit, man, that's an ETAC's freaking fantasy. Like, we're just going to like go do like static OP cast in the combat zone and like basically
It's easy.
These border patrol agents, man. Like, I was like, okay. And the reality was we're trying to secure that border to keep WMD from sneaking back across into Syria. So as we were kind of, if I remember right, man, granted, it'll be 20 years next year. And, I've had a lot of significant emotional events between since then and now. We got re-rolled mid-mission as we were rolling out that way. So, and I don't remember what it was. I just remember sitting in the back of the gun truck, the Humvee, in the penalty box there with a couple of 240 gunners on the guns back there, just sitting there. And my company commander, Dave Doyle, General Doyle now at JRTC, would be like, hey, TC, you up on comms back there? I'm like, no, my radios were off. There was nothing but dark desert everywhere. I'm like, you got it, sir. He's like, anything going on? I'm like, nope, nothing's going on. He's like, okay, stay awake.
Stay awake.
So we had a link up with this recce unit out there in the middle of the desert. Give a shout out to Ed Priest. Didn't even realize he was the CCT ETAC out there at the time. He's a good friend of mine.
He's awesome.
Yeah, he is. So we went into a rest cycle for the remainder of the day, and it was like, all right, hey, radio watch. I was in the fire cell there with the company commander. Like, all right, and I told the guys like, hey, when it's my turn to monitor the SAT channel, make sure I'm awake, man. Like, wake me up. He's like, yeah, got it, will do. Dude, I don't remember anything. I remember waking up and the H250 handset was like laying on the ground next to me, just with that slight static of a SAT. And I'm like, God, I hope nobody called. And they didn't, thank God. So I went with the company commander. Well, we woke up that morning. I realized that Brandy was there, another, my boss. I was like, holy shit, dude. He's like, yep, you guys picked us up last night. I just jumped in back in one of the trucks. I'm like, okay. And actually, that was kind of a little bit of a sigh of relief, because I had somebody to kind of share the burden without even knowing what we're getting into yet, right? I'm like, good, I'm glad he's here, because he's a super smart man. He's a good leader, and he's a good ETAC, and so we went and linked up with the recce guys from a certain unit out there, and we said, yeah, we were told we'd need to go secure and hold Haditha Dam. And those guys like, you're gonna go secure and hold that? And they're like, that's crazy. Like, that's defended like by a brigade plus size of Iraqi infantry and SOF. We're like, yeah, well, that's what they told us to do. And I think the CENTCOM commander got on the line when he says like, hey, you got any questions about this? And my commander's like, yeah, potentially defended by brigade. He's like, yep, you got your orders, go secure it. We're like, shit, okay. So we had a couple from that rec element. They threw us a couple of EOD techs because what we were concerned about was that the dam was rigged to blow, which would completely flooded the entire Fertile Crescent of southern Iraq and would have stopped Third ID in their tracks of coming up from the south. So that's what we were concerned about. And so we went into planning that late afternoon, and we had Garmin E-Trexes, brand new to us at the time. And this is before the joint policy came out, like you can't target with those things. Like we were nominating targets on this thing going in based off templated stuff from the intel officer back in the rear saying, yep, there's AAA here, there's AAA there. This stuff could be in direct lay mode, which is terrifying because I've had that done to me. And so we nominated all these targets, and before we rolled out, I looked up and there's just these contrails and these B-52s are, about 15, 20 clicks away from us while we're rolling through just smacking stuff. And
yes,
hats off to the J2 man, because the intel dude or the intel gal with their intel team, because those lat longs we were passed up with those Garmins were pretty freaking accurate. But the problem was, as we rolled in from the mission support site in the middle of the desert we're at towards Haditha Dam that night, all I had was a jog map, a 1 to 250 jog map. So for the listeners out there, it's what an air crew uses to like, okay, this is an aerial map. It's not like a hiking map that you might be used to as a 1 to 50. And I had F-15s and we had Little Birds as the escort package. And dude, with my red lens headlamp and a jog map the size of Texas, bouncing in the back of a truck, trying to come up with lat longs that passed to an F-15 to go look at prior to. This is 03. We hadn't developed all of our TTPs we use today. It was an absolute nightmare. But we got there, and I remember we got to the dam. We rolled by a bunch of smoldering hulks of stuff we had shacked with the B-52s that shacked from the templates we had sent up, and we rode through a lot of the they got a lot of nomads out there. Bedouin camps out there, and man, there was T-72s and BTR 70s and 60s sitting out there like cold because the Iraqi soldiers were like, yeah, we're just going to come hang out with the Bedouins and not get killed. Smart move in the airport. So we would just roll right by and we didn't pay any attention. And man, when we got to the dam, Haditha Dam, man, I would encourage anybody that's interested in the story like to Google Haditha Dam because it's massive. It's massive. Like we're out here in Vegas Peaches and we got the Hoover Dam, right? And it's massive.
Yeah.
And what's so massive about it is like how deep it is. It's an incredible work.
Yeah. How tall.
It's incredible work of engineering, if not work of art, man. Like it's incredible. But the Haditha Dam, I think it was built by the Soviets in the 60s and 70s to generate power for most of southern Iraq there. And it's a 4-lane hardtop across the top. It's not deep, but it's a 4-lane hardtop and it's massive. So we get up there, the driver hits the accelerator. Brandy's section stops on the western BP. I think it was the west side, and they get engaged pretty quickly. But we don't know the intensity of that firefight initially. We roll through and we collapse on the spillway, like right on top of the dam. And I'm thinking to myself, what the fuck are we doing on top of a spillway, man? The thing is rigged to blow. Like we're going to be surfing all the way down to freaking Kuwait, man. Like why are we in the middle of this thing? So we dismount, and these guards come out of the shack. We woke them up. And these guards come out, and and second time I shot my M4 at a bad guy and smoked a dude, and Rangers killed a whole bunch of them there. Not a whole bunch, like 7 or 8 of them. And I'm walking around with this EOD guy from Bragg, and I'm like, what's he looking at? Like, what's he looking for? And so we walk over this boat, we look down, and there's like Iraqi PT boats out there, patrol boats, and they're shooting at us. I'm like, what is like? And I'm trying to be all brave and like nonchalant, like next to this EOD guy from Bragg, and I'm hearing the crack of bullets going by my head. And finally, when the EOD guy, he's like, "Screw this, dude! I'm not getting shot out here for this." And he gets down, he like hunkers back. I'm like, "That's a good call on my part. I'm gonna do what he just did." So what happened was like we'd all been to Afghanistan at that point. We'd had little ruckuses here and there, but it was like a couple gunshots, maybe from an infield. This is part of the true violence of Afghanistan really came out in effect several years down the road. And I thought it was going to be like another Afghanistan hit. A couple pot shots, things are secured, life goes on, right? No, man, it was a full-on crescendo of what started off as pop shots and just escalated in this significant firefight that went on for over the period of about almost a week, about 5 days. And we had our own internal TACP net, and Brandy's like, hey, man, I can't get to it. Can you request CAS for us? I was like, holy shit, man. Like, what is going on over there? They're about 1,500 meters away from us. So the trusty X-Wing SAT antenna that everybody loves, man, that thing is a no-fail option in a pinch, right? It was mounted on the gun truck. I pick up the handset. I'm calling for CAS, and I don't hear anything back. I'm calling back to the Soul in the AOC or little mobile AOC they had back at probably still in Saudi Arabia. I don't hear anything, and I look at the X-Wing. You know, if you don't check the power, right? Check your connections. Check the antenna. Well, the antenna was missing one of the radiating elements, so instead of an X-Wing, we had a T-Wing. And I'm convinced it was shot off because there's no way anything got hung up on the way it was, right? I didn't have time to inspect it either. I was like, well, this isn't good. And I think we had just got the little DMC 125 Coke can SAT antenna.
Little guys.
I'm like, I don't have time to set that up at the moment, even though that thing is pretty money too. You just throw it on the ground and you're going to radiate. And so I called back. I was like, hey, this is whatever I was, Striker. Can't remember who I was, Striker, whatever. We're in significant contact, objective Cobalt, objective links. We need immediate CAS. And I hear nothing back. I'm like, if you receive this message, please key the hand mic twice. And man, Guardian Angel, I heard a click, click. And I was like, I know CAS is en route. And F-16s checked on. I pushed into Brandy like we should have, like we were supposed to do. And then we start getting these mortars from these little islands out there. It's a grouping of islands out there. And they're mortaring us. And I'm like, so Brandy tries talking the pilot onto those islands out there. I tried talking the pilot onto those islands out there. He could not pick it up. Couldn't even see the plume of when they were launching rounds at us. Just couldn't pick it up because it was the way the islands were laid out. My first experience with the Javelin. Army Ranger with the Javelin puts that clue on that motherfucker and launches that freaking missile out there. Marks the target. And the airplane is like, yep, I see him. I'm in from the west or in from the east, whatever it was. We're like cleared hot, right? So it was just incredible. You know, and I want to talk about those patrol boats. You know, they're lighting us up. Really, they're making more noise than actually being effective because the way the angle was where we were at. And I was trying to put CAS on them, and they would roll out to the lake and try to get a better angle on us. I was talking to F-14s. I was talking to different assets, and they're like, "Yeah, we have GBU-12s, and because the way the lake is, you know, doing this in the trough of the wave and everything else, we can't lock on." I was like, "Okay, we wasted a couple bombs trying to figure that out. Strafe wasn't working, and then I had British Harriers check on." Those dudes like, yeah, we got Mark 82 airbursts, and they put airbursts on those boats and sunk them immediately. Freaking bloody brilliant, and is what I did have a combat controller with me. God, I wish I remembered his name. I want to say it's Luke Thompson, but I think Luke went with me to JFCC or JTEC QC back in the day. But I hadn't really worked with combat control up until that point, and all I heard was like the tug of war between TACP and combat control on an ODA or with the Ranger team or whatever be the case, like fighting over who was the lead for CAS, like just stupid shit, man. And he jumped in the truck with me before we left H1, and I said, he's like, yeah, I'm the combat controller. I'm like, okay. I said, then we need to find our lines of delineation now. Like, what are you responsible for? Like, what am I responsible for? He's like, dude, I'm here to set up HLZs and get resupplying and do this and do that. He's like, you're the fire sporter. I'm like, that was super easy. But the funny thing is the amount of close air support we were controlling up on Haditha Dam. I finally looked at him and I said, are you ETAC certified? He's like, yeah. I was like, would you like some of this? I was like, this is just too much. He's like, I would love to. So myself, him, and a guy named Eric Lund, who's the FSNCO, we got this really great groove going on where one of us would be on the soft lam. We burned up 3 soft lambs out there. Like one of us would be on the soft lam, lasing targets. The other would be controlling the strike, and the other one would be spotting, for wings level and everything. Like all these things that we're doing, and we dropped so much ordnance in and around Haditha, there was so much battle haze and smoke on that valley floor. Lasing became completely ineffective. So everything they advertised to for our lasers that we use to mark targets, man, they're true. It's true, man, because when you have that much smoke down there, you just can't. It's just not effective. Man, I remember dropping bombs on dudes forming up, Iraqi soldiers forming up, and the squad and platoon size, they're ready to come our way. And you drop bombs on them, and the bomb hits right in the middle of them. They all get thrown in the air, and then many of them get up, just kind of dust themselves off, and just keep doing it. Man, we had S-60s, which is AAA, anti-aircraft artillery, put in direct lay mode at us. I remember specifically, Peaches, is I'm on the spillway. I got this kind of like a T-barrier, this concrete T-barrier that you look over and you see the hydro stuff of the dam coming out of it. I'm on this spillway, and I see these tracers coming at us, and I know it's an S-60. And I see these tracers coming. I'm like, oh, I got a quick second, man. I don't have to react to that just yet. And then I would get down, it would impact the wall, take out a little bit of brick or a little bit of cement here and there. And then I started thinking to myself, Tom, don't be an idiot, dude. Like, for every tracer, there's probably 3 more rounds in front of that thing, Yeah. So a lot of valuable lessons learned in that regard, in the fact that, like, you just learn so much about yourself, man. And I'll tell you, my first, this is such a moral of the story is, right? My first, like, real world live fly or fast cast control was an F-16, call sign Darby 5-4 on Haditha Dam. We got this Iraqi version of an LMTV, a cargo truck, barreling down that 4-lane high top at us. I think Livide and Ripito had just been killed not too long before that with a suicide bomber at one of the checkpoints coming into the dam. So that was resonating with us, and we're like, we don't know what's in this truck. So I'm controlling an F-16. I give him the truck. It was between us and another blocking position on the east side. And but we have a little bit of time, but it's picking up speed. It's barreling down the flat top up there on top of the dam. And we're all shooting small arms on it and everything else, and I'm controlling at the same time. And I tell Darby 5-4, he's like, yeah, I got the target. Go through the whole thing of that piece. This is in the early days of the invasion of Iraq. I'm looking medium altitude up, thinking he's going to be up at 20,000 feet. And I hear the cannons open up on the F-16 because it sounds like a zipper being ripped off. And I'm like, What is, and I look around, and like the truck's still barreling down, and I look over and I see Darby 5-4 at the top, just above the lake, just screaming across. So basically a high angle strafe. And what happened is what he engaged was the blocking position of Rangers on that east side blocking position. But not a single Ranger got hit. Fucking,
oh my
grace
gosh.
God, man. The Rangers thought it was the greatest thing in America, and they're all screaming and ranting and raving like, yeah, America, and all, doing, being Rangerific. And I'm mortified, man. I'm terrified. And I'm like, Darby 5-4, I did not give you permission to release. I did not clear you in any way, shape, or form. You need to get the hell out of here. Go check in with whoever. And my commander, my company commander, Dave Doyle, he looked at me and he's like, TC, I saw what happened. You didn't do anything wrong. I need you to have confidence and get back on the mic and keep controlling. I was like, holy cow, man. Like the faith that this guy is putting in his ETAC, in his Air Force guy, is tremendous. And that's probably because I was a little shaken from that, man. Like where did I go wrong? Or was the pilot just, hungry? Like what's going, like all these things, like I'm second guessing myself. He's like, I have faith in you. You didn't do anything wrong. That's on the pilot. So you just keep doing it. That's exactly what we needed, man. That's exactly what we needed in that moment to carry that momentum forward over the next 3 to 4 days. And that's what we did. We at night, Iraqis would come in and probe the lines. Rangers would open up on them. They'd die. We had a metric ton of POWs, man, and the absolute brutality of this regime, man. Like these guys, a lot of them are like kind of like conscripted for the war, on the Iraqi side, and they're like, yeah, man, I'm hanging up the hat, man. I'm gonna go surrender to the Americans. Like their commanders would cut their ears off to make them stay, would cut their noses off to make them stay, and we would round these guys up as POWs. Just the absolute brutality. So from that aspect, I understood what we were doing because this is just brutal. But from the other aspect is I also am a firm believer that sometimes certain nations need a dictator just to keep them in line. which has been proven over since, I don't know, 2012-ish. So that was kind of, Mark Foster, another good friend of mine. He was a SECO, and they came through after a couple of days of fighting Haditha Dam at night just to kind of do a bomb damage assessment of everything we destroyed down there. And he's up on the internal TACP net with me, and he's like, Jesus, Tom, it's like a nuclear bomb went off down here. Like, we decimated that place. But because there was power plants and all those other infrastructure out there, we didn't touch it. One of those things, we waged war around all these high value things that kept the civility intact, with power and plumbing and all those things that those people need. Never touched those things. And we kept the dam running the entire time. It was never rid of explosives, at least not to my knowledge. They had a massive chow hall down there. So when the Ranger Reconnaissance guys came up, we gave them some potatoes and they made French fries. They had a shower down there. We found massive amounts of toothpaste. So it was a pretty good FOB, Forward Operating Base, kind of at the end of the day. But and the last thing I'll say about the Haditha Dam piece was we got artilleried for 8. We got over, I don't remember, it was 400 rounds of artillery in a 6-hour period. And what would happen is we'd see Willie Pete round come in as a marking round. And, we were worried about chem warfare at the time, too. We fought the entire time on our J list. I had my chem suit on and running, caddies and a brown shirt on. But it was April, so the weather was completely cool with it. It wasn't bad, March and April. And so we would watch this white smoke go off. Then we'd be like, is that chem? And then we'd see a dog run through it. And we'd like, okay, there's a lot of wild dogs out there. We're like, okay,
yeah, lots of them.
We're good. And we spent an inordinate amount of time of just with spotting scopes trying to find these observers. And we would find them up in the corners of apartment buildings that was overlooking us several clicks away. And we would put 30 millimeter, 20 millimeter rounds in those buildings in order to keep the CD concerns low. And then finally, the Ranger Reconnaissance team out there, Sean O'Neill, was a TACP with them after Scott was killed. And they were able to find those. I think they're about 25 clicks away, just rocking us, man.
Jeez.
We left the dam, exfilled back to H1. A new company came in, and then eventually, I think the Marines, either the 101st or the Marines, came in and secured it after the heavy fighting was pretty much done. And that's a testament of the Rangers, man. They have morphed so much since 9/11, man. Like they've gone from what we thought Rangers did, even though that wasn't necessarily true even then, to what they do today as a premier raid force, and to watch it and to be part of that, one of the most historic raids in Ranger history was Haditha Dam, and to be part of that is freaking awesome.
Hell yeah.
And to watch them go from a special operations raid force and quickly transmorph into that conventional infantry force of force on force was pretty cool, man. And I got back to H1. I did another mission where we went out and helped them put out some oil well fires out there north that the regime had lit on fire. And then we had this place, man, excuse the term, I didn't name it, man. They called it the ARCOC, the Ranger Combat Operations Center, back at the airfield we launched out of. So I went in there, I pulled a couple shifts, just to see what was going on. And we're still eating MREs. And I would go into the ARCOC in the foyer there, and I would look for an MRE. Of course, all the good ones are always gone. It was always like the vegetarian meals and the ones that nobody liked, the bean burrito thing, just awful. So I was getting pissed, man, because I never got. I was living off the MRE hamburger out there for a month, And
Dude, where's the Chili Mac at?
They're all gone. So
Of course they were.
I saved all the vegetarian nasty meals that nobody wanted, and I got a box, an MRE box, and I stacked them inside there. And we had super glue in part of our kits, and I super glued shit and slid the bands back on. I'm like, I'm just going to watch this go down in the entry of the ARCOC there. And I was sitting there, and there comes General Retired Joe Votella, who was the regimental commander at the time, and his sergeant major. And they come in, and Sergeant Major's like, "Hey, sir, you want an MRE?" He's like, yeah, sir, yeah, just grab me one, whatever. So I'm watching General Votell, Colonel Votell at the time, cut the bands, open it up, and he pulls one out, and he's like, no. He's like, what the fuck? He's just surrounded by MREs, like 12 MREs or whatever it was, of just things that nobody wants to eat, and I'm just dying laughing, man. And what do I say? Because like a couple things with the Haditha Dam story, and you just got a snippet of it there, but now you understand kind of the basis of it and what it was. But man, as you guys well know, man, you find humor in combat, right? You find things that are going to make you laugh and make you smile and make you giggle. Man, I remember sitting up on Haditha Dam with Eric Lund, the FSNCO, and we're looking across this orchard full of palm trees. It's palm orchard, and we're just sitting there. We're like, "Holy shit, it's beautiful up here," Yep. And he's like, "Yeah, man, it really is," And then we'd have the moment of intensity. It was a serious firefight going on around us, and we just start laughing, because it's a coping mechanism, man. Like you just laugh because what else are you gonna do? And whatnot. And the last thing I will say about Haditha is that was the first time I ever controlled bomber casts full of JDAMs, and I was terrified. We had all these probing points that were coming in at night, and the commander's like, how do we hit those simultaneously to distract and dissuade and kill people trying to come through there? I was like, well, we can send a request for a B-52. He's like, okay. So me and Eric sat down with our Garmin E-Trexes and started genning up lat longs. They come back like B-52 is denied, but you got a B-1 coming, and it's loaded to bear with JDAMs. I'm like, okay. So the cool thing about bomber casts is there's nothing fast about it, right? If you have the time, bomber cast is okay. I'm okay with it. Any plane can do close air sport. And I pass them all these coordinates. It was like 18 or 20 coordinates. They read them all back to me, which takes forever. I'm like, all right, bone one's in from the north. I was like, okay. And, that in call from a B-1 or from a B-52, it takes a long time for them to get from where they start at to where they're going to employ. And I give them the cleared hot. And before I did that, I looked at Captain Doyle at the time. I said, hey, sir, I'm just going to let you know I've never done this before, so I don't know exactly what's going to happen. And I hope that me and Eric Lund's freaking lat longs are correct, because we checked, and double-checked. He's like, all right. And he puts a call out over the assault net or the command net. He's like, everybody get your heads down. We don't know what we're dealing with here. Something along those lines. And that B-1 comes across and you can hear it. And then you're just sitting there. And then you just start seeing things just blow up. Boom. Like all over the place where these JDAMs are flying to. And there's video of it, man. And you just like the Ranger's like, holy shit, man, that's awesome. And now I'm in the back. You can hear me. I'm like, take that, you fuckers. And then those bombs just started creeping more and more south towards the residential area. And I aborted the rest of the passes, but we met the intent. And that was the first time I'd ever done B-1 casts or bomber casts in general. And it was pretty freaking glorious, man. I'm kind of a fan when you have the time to do it. They're not super reactionary, but for a pre-planned opportunity, they're pretty amazing when it comes to that stuff. So yeah, that's kind of the Haditha Dam story in a nutshell. Trent Joy was one of our senior airmen. He was augmenting us. Later became a special tactics officer, hanging out, and I think getting ready to retire. Just retired out there in the Florida Panhandle. And I think he was running around just taking dumps in Iraqi helmets he found, whatever else. Shenanigans. It's like
that's hearsay.
It is. It's all hearsay. And I'll disclaimer that with like the things you do in the moment and in those types of environments and combat zones, like the things you do it as a stress relief. Saying cleared hot on the range is a great stress relief, right? Saying cleared hot on the battlefield is a stress multiplier. And I think that's the huge difference, because when we got back to the States not too long after, like, hey, we got to go out to the range and do some cast training on Fort Benning. And a couple of us were like, oh, really? Like, it was so hard to transition from like doing the deed in the show to going back and rehearsing for the show again, So that was kind of Silver Star number one. That was the Army, the Air Force wrote that one, I believe. And it was awarded the following, just before Christmas of 2004. And they did it in conjunction with not only us, but also our squadron commander at the time, Colonel Fairchild, who was the F-15 driver with Kevin Vance and Gabe Brown up in Anaconda. So he got his Silver Star for supporting Kev and Gabe in those endeavors a couple years prior. And then we had Shropshire there with us too, getting recognized for the stuff he did with 3rd Infantry Division. Anybody know?
Shropshire.
Yeah, he's only 2 feet tall, so you'll miss him.
He is.
But just kidding, Shrop. If you listen to this, I love you, buddy.
I don't know where he's at these days, but yeah, he's still taller than me. But yeah, he's a little hobbit as well.
Yeah, he's hanging out in Oklahoma doing CrossFit stuff. So,
well, good on him. Well, TC, man, you've got so much to tell, and you're a phenomenal storyteller. So what I want to do is I want to break right now and just kind of close up this podcast, and then have you back on for a part 2, because I promise you people are going to eat this up. And for me, this is amazing. And I know it is for Trent too, but like, this is amazing for me because it takes me right back to when I was doing cool stuff, because I was there during that time. I wasn't, near Haditha, but, I was in Baghdad and then, early in Afghanistan and all that kind of stuff. So it's therapeutic for me as well.
It's therapeutic to tell it too. Every time I tell a story, there's a little more therapy involved for me. Because, and even with part 2, we could talk about it a little bit too, because the scars you carry, and I would like to close out with this. When my oldest son graduated high school in 2015, my parents were out and, we celebrated him. I was in Fayetteville, North Carolina at the time. And I'm sure vodka had something to do with the time, but man, I got super, super emotional. With my mom sitting there and my wife sitting there on the back patio, on a decent June night in North Carolina. And man, I'll tell you, like, all these emotions just came out about like the stuff in Iraq and some other stuff we had done. Because it's very easy to listeners out there. It's very easy the job's not hard. What we do is not hard. I think getting to do the job is probably the hardest part at the end of the day, physically and mentally, but doing the job's not that hard if you have half a brain. But it's very easy to get what I like to refer to as a God complex when you're out there. Because what you're bringing, what you bring to the fight is tremendous. And man, we have senior airmen who are shouldering this responsibility of delivering massive amounts of ordnance. And that responsibility, even for whether you're a senior airman or a master sergeant, is tremendous. And it's easy to get a God complex, and it's easy to easily stray from the overall intent of the mission and just start killing shit. And I'll leave it with right, wrong, or indifferent.
Yeah, I mean, and what we talk about when you mentioned senior airmen, we're talking about 19-year-olds.
Yeah,
like they could be 19, 20-year-olds that are making these decisions and put into situations that are fantastic, both on the good and bad spectrum.
Absolutely.
Situations. So, Tommy, really appreciate your time. Thanks for it's amazing. I'll go ahead and schedule part 2 with you here once we close out. But yeah, thanks for joining us, everybody that's out there. Please leave a review, subscribe, hit the bell, check out the merch store, and we're out here. Thanks again, TC.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.